On our honeymoon he pushed me into the hotel pool in front of his friends, laughed, called me just a charity case. That night while he was passed out drunk I slipped his safe code from his phone, took the cash and diamonds and left the ring in a glass of bourbon. He woke up alone, robbed and humiliated. The bourbon burned my throat as I stared at his phone. 3 a.m. and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. There was proof in black and white. My entire marriage had been a business transaction. I wasn't Ethan's wife, I was his acquisition. My mind flashed back to our first meeting. 6 months ago, I'd been Claire Adams, respected marketing consultant with the Department of Energy's Clean Tech Initiative. I'd noticed him immediately at the networking mixer. Tall, confident, with that perfect smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Little did I know I was being sized up like a corporate target. Claire, right? The brains behind the solar grid campaign. His voice carried that practiced smoothness wealthy men seem born with. Ethan Anderson. I've been hoping to meet you. I remember feeling flattered. In a room full of powerful people he'd singled me out. Now I understood why. My security clearance and connections to the government contract worth millions made me valuable. Nothing more. I don't usually do this, he'd said after an hour of surprisingly engaging conversation, but would you like to have dinner sometime? His fingers had brushed mine as he handed me his business card. Anderson Technologies CO, embossed in silver. I should have recognized the predatory gleam in his eyes, but I mistook it for interest. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant where he claimed to know the chef. He ordered for both of us without asking, a red flag I dismissed as old-fashioned charm. The way he studied me while I spoke about my work should have been another warning. He wasn't fascinated, he was gathering intelligence. You're not like other women in this industry, he'd said, refilling my wine glass. They're all ambition and no substance. You actually care about the impact of your work. I blushed then, taken in by the compliment that I now realize was carefully crafted manipulation. Ethan had done his homework on me. My middle-class background, my father's early death, my scholarship to Cornell, my dedication to renewable energy projects. He knew exactly which buttons to push. The courtship moved with dizzying speed. Weekend getaways to his cabin in Vermont. Surprise lunch deliveries to my office. Late-night calls where he seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts on everything from climate policy to my favorite books. All an elaborate performance. 3 weeks in, he invited me to Sunday dinner with his family. The Anderson estate sprawled across 10 acres in Connecticut, old money mingling with new tech wealth. His mother Caroline's smile never reached her eyes as she assessed my off-the-rack dress. His father Richard barely looked up from his phone except to ask pointed questions about my government connections. Claire works with the DOE's Renewable Energy Initiative, Ethan had explained, his hand possessively on my lower back. She's helping reshape America's power infrastructure. How useful, Caroline had replied, her gaze flicking between us with calculation. That night, driving back to the city, Ethan revealed more about his family's expectations. They've always pushed me to be the best, sometimes ruthlessly, he'd admitted, seeming vulnerable for once. You're the first woman I've brought home who made me feel like I could be myself. Another calculated line in his script. I recognized that now. The gift started the following week. A designer watch I mentioned liking in passing. Earrings that reminded him of my eyes. Access to his company's private box at Yankees games. Each present came with the same message: you deserve to be spoiled, Claire. What I didn't see was how each gift raised the stakes, making me increasingly indebted to his generosity. How could I question someone so thoughtful, so attentive? 2 months in, we attended a tech conference in Chicago. Ethan introduced me to everyone as the brilliant Claire Adams. His arm always around my waist, his lips frequently brushing my ear to whisper inside jokes. His investor friends treated me with surface-level respect that I mistook for acceptance. You've changed him, one of them told me during cocktail hour, whiskey in hand. Never seen Anderson so settled. He'd studied me with something like amusement. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. It wasn't a compliment. It was surveillance, reporting back to their circle that Ethan's plan was progressing. The proposal came on day 83 of our relationship. I'd counted once, marveling at how quickly we'd fallen in love. The restaurant overlooked Central Park. The ring was 3 carats, ethically sourced, he'd assured me, and the speech seemed heartfelt. Claire, you've shown me what it means to have purpose beyond profit. he'd said, eyes glistening with what I believed were tears of emotion rather than the crocodile performance they actually were. I want to build something lasting with you. Something meaningful. My colleagues were shocked. Isn't this moving a bit fast, Claire? But I defended him fiercely. My best friend Megan tried to intervene the night before our small, rushed ceremony. I barely know him anymore, she'd said, concern etching her face. 4 months, Claire. You've known him 4 months and suddenly you're eloping? I'd accused her of jealousy, cutting her off when she tried to point out how I'd changed, how I'd been canceling our plans, how my confidence seemed diminished. You don't understand what we have, I'd insisted. The we, that never actually existed. The wedding was intimate, by his design I now realized to limit witnesses. My mother looked uncertain as she hugged me. You're sure about this? She'd whispered. I'd nodded emphatically, mistaking my own anxiety for excitement. That night, as I signed the rushed prenuptial agreement his family lawyer had prepared, Ethan had kissed my forehead. Just formalities, babe. Nothing that will ever matter to us. One more lie in a foundation built on deception. As I sit here in our honeymoon suite, his drunken snores filling the room, I think about all the signs I ignored. All the red flags I justified away. The calculated courtship that led me straight into his trap. His phone in my hand contains the blueprint of my destruction, and now it will become the architect of his. The ice in his bourbon glass clinks as I drop my wedding ring into it. Some marriages end with a whimper. Mine would end with justice. The morning after our wedding, I woke to Ethan on his phone, voice low and businesslike. When he noticed me stirring, his tone immediately shifted to honey sweet as he ended the call. Morning, Mrs. Anderson, he said, kissing my forehead. That duality would become the hallmark of our marriage. The man the world saw versus the one I lived with behind closed doors. The first real change happened when we returned from our brief weekend pre-honeymoon at his family's lake house. Ethan insisted I move into his downtown apartment rather than us finding a new place together. Why start from scratch when I already have the perfect home? He'd reasoned. I didn't realize I was surrendering neutral territory, that everything would be his space, his rules. My cherished collection of art books and framed photography prints ended up in storage. They don't match our aesthetic, he explained, already using our to mean his preferences. My comfortable reading chair disappeared while I was at work. Surprise. I got you something better, he announced, replacing it with an expensive but painfully uncomfortable designer piece. Within 2 weeks, the apartment no longer contained traces of Claire Adams. I had been erased and rebranded as Mrs. Ethan Anderson. Don't you think it's time to consider your next career move? He asked one night over dinner, 3 weeks after the wedding. I looked up, confused. What do you mean? I love my position at the DOE. He swirled his bourbon, that amber liquid that would become the scent memory of my oppression. It's just that with my connections you could do something more significant. My work is already significant, I countered, feeling strangely defensive. We're helping reshape America's energy future. His smile didn't reach his eyes. That's adorable. But you're an Anderson now. Playing with solar panels is fine for Claire Adams. Mrs. Anderson should have ambitions that match her station. When I didn't immediately agree, his face hardened momentarily before softening into concern. I just want what's best for you, for us. Trust me on this. That became his mantra. Trust me, trust me, trust me, until questioning him felt like betrayal. The first time he checked my phone, he didn't even try to hide it. Who's Michael? He asked, scrolling through my messages while I cooked dinner. My colleague from the Federal Grant Committee, I answered, trying to ignore the invasion of privacy. We're coordinating the quarterly review. Seems friendly. His tone made my stomach knot. Maybe I should join you for lunch sometime, meet your work friends. He did exactly that the following week, arriving unannounced at my office with takeout for everyone. He charmed my coworkers while subtly establishing territory, his hand never leaving my lower back, interrupting whenever Michael spoke directly to me. After that, work invitations dwindled. My colleague Jen, once a daily lunch companion, started making excuses. Months later, she admitted, "Your husband made it clear you were limiting outside work commitments. He said you felt overwhelmed but didn't know how to say no." Words I'd never spoken, boundaries I'd never set. Megan tried hardest to maintain our friendship. "Girls' night still on for Thursday?" She texted 6 weeks into my marriage. Before I could respond, Ethan appeared behind me. Tell her we have plans. Do we? I asked, genuinely uncertain. I was going to surprise you. Dinner with the Wilsons. Potentially huge investors. His tone left no room for discussion. When I texted Megan to cancel, the third time that month, her response cut deep. I miss my friend. The real Claire, not this Stepford wife version. I stared at those words until Ethan asked who I was texting. I lied for the first time, saying it was my mother. The fact that I felt compelled to hide a simple message marked how far things had deteriorated. My uneasiness grew into constant anxiety. Ethan's moods became my weather system. I checked for storm signs the moment he walked through the door. The set of his jaw, the looseness of his tie, whether he reached immediately for the bourbon decanter. All indicators of the evening ahead. On good days he was attentive, even loving. On bad days his criticisms cut to the bone. That outfit makes you look unprofessional, he'd remark as I left for work, making me doubt the wardrobe choices I'd made confidently for years. You're misremembering, he'd insist when I recalled conversations differently than he did, making me question my own mind. You always get emotional when we discuss finances, he'd sigh when I asked about account access, making me feel irrational for wanting basic information about our shared life. The day I found the first camera was purely accidental. I'd been searching for a spare phone charger in his home office, a room he'd told me to not worry about cleaning. The small black device was tucked into the bookshelf, lens angled perfectly toward the desk chair. I might have believed it was for security if it hadn't been so carefully hidden. Heart racing, I began a methodical search of our apartment while Ethan was at a business dinner. 2 more cameras in the living room disguised as clock radios. Another in our bedroom hidden in the air vent. That night, I lay awake beside him, wondering why my husband needed surveillance in our private spaces. Instead of confrontation, fear kept me silent. I began changing clothes in the bathroom, watching my words, performing the role of contented wife even in supposed privacy. The final domino fell when I discovered I couldn't access my own bank account. The error message claimed incorrect password, though I'd used the same one for years. At the bank the next day, the manager's uncomfortable expression told me everything before he spoke. Mrs. Anderson, your accounts have been consolidated under the joint management structure. Your husband assured us this was done with your full knowledge and consent. I maintained composure somehow. Of course, I must have forgotten. That night, Ethan presented me with a credit card. For your expenses, he explained as if doing me a favor. I've set up automatic payments, so you don't need to worry about managing the tedious details. Financial independence, gone. Career autonomy, undermined. Friendships, isolated. Privacy, non-existent. Identity, eroded. I lived in a beautiful prison with invisible bars, constructed so gradually I hadn't noticed until I was fully caged. My thoughts, movements, relationships, and finances all controlled by the man who'd vowed to honor and cherish me. As I prepared for our real honeymoon, the resort stay he'd insisted on delaying until some mysterious business timing was right, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back had the same features as Claire Adams, but her eyes held something new, the hollow recognition of a person who finally understands she's been expertly manipulated. I packed my suitcase carefully, hiding my anxiety behind a practiced smile. I didn't know then that this trip would break both my heart and my chains, that it would end with bourbon, diamonds, and the first breath of freedom I'd taken months. The Blue Ridge Mountain Resort loomed before us like a postcard fantasy, stone and timber rising against the April sky, staff lined up to greet arriving guests with practiced smiles. Ethan's hand rested possessively on my lower back as the valet took our rental car. Anderson reservation, he announced at check-in, his voice carrying that entitled edge I'd grown to recognize. We'll need the Laurel Suite. The concierge's fingers danced across her keyboard. I have you in the Pine Suite, Mr. Anderson. That won't work. His smile remained fixed, but I felt the tension radiating from him. I specifically requested the Laurel. It overlooks the south lawn where the reception will be held tomorrow. Reception? This was the first I'd heard of any event. I maintained my composure, having learned that questioning Ethan publicly meant private consequences. The concierge made a call, spoke in hushed tones, then smiled brightly. We've arranged it, Mr. Anderson. My apologies for the confusion. In the elevator I finally asked, What reception? Just a small gathering. Some investors are coincidentally staying here this weekend. Perfect timing to introduce you properly. His tone implied I should be grateful for the opportunity. The Laurel Suite sprawled over 1,500 square feet of luxury, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing mountains and manicured gardens. Under different circumstances I might have gasped with delight. Instead I noted the precise view of the lawn and pool area. Nothing coincidental about it. Wear the blue dress tonight, Ethan instructed, checking his watch. We're meeting everyone for drinks at 7. The small gathering turned out to be 8 men and their ornamental wives, all connected to Ethan's latest venture. I recognized James Wilson and Peter Thorne from tech industry headlines, both notorious for their aggressive investment strategies. The others were equally powerful if less publicly known. So you're the government connection, Wilson said by way of greeting, not bothering to use my name. His eyes assessed me like merchandise. Claire works in sustainable energy marketing, Ethan corrected smoothly, his arm tightening around my waist. But she's taking a step back to consider more impactful opportunities. News to me. I smiled through gritted teeth, remembering the cameras at home recording every expression. Smart move, Thorne chimed in. Those government positions are dead ends anyway. Plus the clearance process is a nightmare, all those background checks. His glance between me and Ethan carried unspoken meaning. The evening progressed with business talk thinly disguised as social conversation. The men dominated while their wives discussed vacation properties and charity galas. When I attempted to contribute to the business discussion, naively thinking my industry knowledge might be valuable, conversation awkwardly paused. Sweetie, why don't you tell Susan about that art gallery we visited last month? Ethan suggested, effectively dismissing me to the wives' corner. I excused myself to the restroom, splashing cold water on my face to cool the burning humiliation. In the mirror I barely recognized myself. Designer dress, professional makeup, hairstyle to Ethan's specifications. A doll dressed for display. The second night brought more of the same, but with Ethan drinking steadily, bourbon after bourbon disappearing as he grew louder, more forceful with his opinions. His public mask slipped further with each glass. The problem with government contracts, he announced to the group, is dealing with all the self-important bureaucrats who think they're saving the world. His eyes flicked to me. No offense, babe. Laughter rippled around the table. I smiled mechanically, nursing my single glass of wine. By the third day, I'd become nearly invisible except when Ethan needed to demonstrate his ownership. His hand would suddenly grasp mine during conversations, or he'd interrupt whatever I was saying to kiss my cheek. Performances of affection that felt like warnings. That afternoon, everyone gathered by the heated pool despite the cool mountain air. I sat on a lounger, wrapped in a resort robe over my swimsuit, observing the dynamics of these powerful men and their carefully selected partners. Wilson approached, bourbon in hand, everyone mimicking Ethan's drink preference. You've really cleaned up nicely, he said, his voice low. Ethan said you were a diamond in the rough when he found you. Good call on his part. Before I could respond, Ethan appeared beside us, his own tumbler nearly empty. What are we discussing? Just complimenting your taste, Wilson replied with a smirk. Though I wouldn't have pegged you for the rescuer type. Something dark flashed across Ethan's face. Claire, get me another drink, he ordered, handing me his glass without looking at me. I stood, taking the glass mostly to extract myself from the tension between them. As I turned toward the bar, I heard Wilson chuckle. Seriously, Anderson, what's your angle? She's pretty enough, but hardly your usual type. I paused, knowing I shouldn't listen but unable to move. Claire has useful connections, Ethan replied, voice pitched low but carrying in the mountain air. Sometimes you need to invest in unexpected places. Quite an investment, another voice joined in, Thorne, I realized. Marriage seems extreme for a business connection. It's temporary, Ethan said dismissively. Once the contracts are secured, I'll find an exit strategy. Nothing messier than divorcing someone with government ties, though. Have to be careful. The glass nearly slipped from my fingers. Every suspicion, every doubt I'd pushed aside crashed through me in a wave of validation and devastation. I turned back, face burning, intending to what? Confront him? Create a scene? I wasn't sure. Ethan saw me standing there, understood immediately what I'd overheard. Instead of shame or apology, his expression hardened into something dangerous. He crossed to me in 3 quick strides, took the empty glass from my shaking hand. For a heartbeat I thought he might apologize. Instead he placed his hands on my shoulders and shoved, hard. I stumbled backward, arms windmilling before plunging into the freezing pool. The shock of cold water stole my breath as I sank, designer sundress billowing around me. When I surfaced, gasping and disoriented, Ethan stood at the pool's edge surrounded by his investors. "Just showing them the charity project floats," he announced, raising an imaginary glass in mock toast. "Told you guys she was adaptable." Their laughter cut worse than the cold. Women turned away, pretending not to see. Staff hovered uncertainly, no one willing to help the woman who'd been deliberately humiliated. I pushed soaked hair from my face and made my way to the pool steps, dignity in tatters but something else rising within me. Clarity, rage, resolve. Water streamed from my ruined dress as I walked past Ethan without acknowledgement, past the witnesses to my degradation, past the point of caring what anyone thought. In that moment, dripping on expensive marble, listening to their laughter fade behind me, I understood 3 things with perfect clarity. My marriage was a business transaction, my husband was a dangerous fraud, and I needed to escape before he discovered I knew. I left wet footprints across the lobby, drawing stares and whispers. The elevator ride to our suite stretched eternally, my sodden clothes chilling my skin but not the anger burning inside. For the first time in months, my mind felt laser-sharp, unfogged by doubt or manipulation. By the time I reached our room, I knew with absolute certainty I would not spend another night as Mrs. Ethan Anderson. I peeled off my soaked dress in the bathroom, wrapping myself in the plush hotel robe. My reflection stared back at me, hair plastered to my skull, mascara tracking down my cheeks, eyes finally completely clear. The woman in the mirror wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor plotting her escape. For 2 hours I sat motionless on the bathroom floor, back against the cold tile wall, planning. Ethan wouldn't return immediately. He'd stay with his cronies, drinking bourbon and laughing about his dripping wet wife. I had time but not much. The suite door slammed around 11, followed by the thunk of shoes hitting the floor. Uneven footsteps. The familiar clink of the decanter against a glass. More bourbon, as if he hadn't had enough. "Claire." His voice was thick, vowels stretched by intoxication. "You hiding from me?" I remained silent, pulse hammering in my throat. "Fine. Be that way." The television flicked on, sports commentary filling the suite. I cracked the bathroom door an hour later. Ethan sprawled across the sofa, head lolled back, mouth open in drunken sleep. 3 empty mini bottles from the suite's bar littered the coffee table. His shirt was stained with what looked like spilled whiskey. Moving silently, I crossed to check the bedroom. I returned to study my sleeping husband, the man who'd called me a charity case, who'd pushed me into freezing water for the amusement of his investors, who'd married me for government contracts. His phone lay on the couch beside him, screen periodically lighting up with notifications. The device that had been his constant companion, always locked, always guarded. Now it was unattended, and I knew Ethan well enough to understand this wasn't carelessness. It was arrogance. He genuinely believed I was too broken, too controlled to ever look. I eased the phone from beside his leg, heart nearly stopping when he shifted. But his breathing remained deep and regular. Bourbon had become my unexpected ally. The first hurdle, his passcode. 6 digits. Not his birthday. I'd seen him enter it often enough to know that wasn't it. Not our wedding date either. I stared at the keypad, mind racing. What would a narcissist like Ethan use? On a hunch, I tried the date Anderson Technologies went public. The moment he'd officially become wealthy rather than just privileged. The phone unlocked. My hands trembled as I navigated to his email. Hundreds of unread messages from people seeking his attention, his money, his approval. I bypassed those, searching for anything about me, about our marriage, about government contracts. The first damning email appeared in a folder labeled Project Conduit. A message from James Wilson, dated 3 weeks before our first meeting. Candidate identified. Claire Adams. DOE Marketing Consultant, Security Clearance Level 2, direct access to bid committee members. No serious relationships in the past 2 years. Father deceased, mother in Arizona. Attached background profile indicates potential vulnerabilities. workaholic tendencies, idealistic worldview, history of long-term commitments. Recommend personal approach rather than digital introduction. My stomach twisted. They'd researched me, analyzed me, selected me like a target. The chance meeting at the networking event had been meticulously planned. I scrolled further, finding messages between Ethan and his father. The Adams woman is responding well to initial approach. Estimated timeline to proposal, 3 months. Will accelerate if possible. Engagement secured. Wedding set for 6 weeks out. Will ensure minimal attendance/documentation. DOE contacts already mentioning potential inside track on Phase 2 bidding. Keep legal team ready for contract submission window. Another message, this one from Ethan to Peter Thorne. Marriage status secured. Already leveraged connection for preliminary bid documentation. Claire has no idea her department's security protocols are being channeled through home network. Surveillance package delivering excellent results. Phase 1 complete. I sank onto the edge of the coffee table, legs suddenly unable to support me. The surveillance cameras in our home weren't just for controlling me, they were capturing my work calls, my laptop screen, using my presence to bypass security. The most recent email thread from yesterday solidified everything. Team resort meeting productive. Final bid package nearly ready. Contract announcement expected within 60 days. Claire becoming potential liability. Too many questions recently. Recommend accelerating exit timeline after bid submission. Anderson legal prepared for optimal dissolution strategy. Unfortunate mental health episodes documented via home surveillance will support favorable settlement terms. Target completion, 6 months from wedding date. Mental health episodes? I scanned further, finding video clips Ethan had compiled. Moments of me crying after his gaslighting, looking confused when he'd moved things around the apartment and blamed me for losing them, appearing anxious when he'd deliberately triggered arguments before important work calls. All edited, all stripped of context, all designed to paint me as unstable. They weren't just planning to divorce me, they were planning to destroy me. A voice note attachment caught my attention. Ethan's voice slightly slurred. I give it 6 months. I'll get the contract and she'll be history. Dad's already lined up 3 potential replacements. Younger, more connected, less questions. The Adams experiment worked but won't be repeated. Experiment. That's all I was to him. I continued searching, fingers flying across the screen, uncovering more damning evidence. Photos of our home office with annotations showing camera placements. Screenshots of my work email captured without my knowledge. A document titled Claire Separation Strategy, with dates, actions, and assigned responsibilities. A complete plan to discredit and discard me once I'd served my purpose. My discovery shifted from shock to practical intelligence gathering. I forwarded key emails to a new anonymous account I created on the spot, being careful to delete the sent messages and empty the trash. I photographed documents using the hotel notepad as background for scale. I made mental notes of names, dates, bank accounts mentioned. While searching his photos, looking for more evidence of surveillance, I stumbled across something unexpected. A folder labeled Contingency. Inside were photos of diamond jewelry, stacks of cash, and a piece of paper with alphanumeric codes I recognized immediately as cryptocurrency wallet keys. The final piece was a photo of a small safe, open to reveal its contents, with a post-it showing its combination. The location was unmistakable, the closet of our suite. Ethan had an escape plan of his own, assets hidden away from his business partners and family. As I stood there, Ethan's phone in one hand and irrefutable evidence in the other, a strangled snore erupted from his throat. He shifted, mumbling something unintelligible, then settled back into drunken oblivion. I returned his phone precisely where I'd found it, then retreated to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Sitting on the edge of the marble tub, I processed everything I'd discovered. My husband had targeted, researched, and manipulated me. He'd married me solely to access government contracts. He'd surveilled me for business intelligence. He'd documented fake episodes to use against me. He'd already planned our divorce and my destruction. He had hidden assets in our very room. The woman who walked into that bathroom was still partly in shock, still partially trapped in Ethan's reality. The woman who emerged an hour later was something else entirely. focused, determined, and finally seeing the complete picture of her marriage. I wasn't just Ethan's wife. I was his mark, his stepping stone, his temporary means to an end. But now, with midnight revelations burning in my mind, I would become something he never anticipated, the architect of his downfall. The hotel suite was silent except for Ethan's heavy breathing and the occasional ice settling in the bucket. 3:17 a.m., the hour of reckoning. I'd given myself until dawn to disappear. My fingers traced along the closet's back panel, finding the slight indentation exactly where Ethan's photo had shown it. With gentle pressure, the false wall clicked open, revealing a small hotel safe, not the standard one provided at check-in, but a personal unit he must have installed during his mysterious business call, our first day here. I recalled the combination from his phone. 062218. The date Anderson Technologies acquired its biggest competitor. More proof that Ethan's most intimate relationships were with his business milestones. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside lay 4 stacks of $100 bills, each bound with paper bands marked $10,000. Next to them, a velvet pouch that, when emptied onto my palm, revealed 5 loose diamonds, the ones he'd claimed his controlling grandmother refused to part with when I'd asked about family heirlooms before our wedding. More lies. More manipulation. More evidence of the life he'd been concealing. Beneath the valuables lay a small leather notebook containing handwritten codes and passwords. I recognized the format immediately: cryptocurrency wallet information. During our marriage, Ethan had dismissively explained crypto as too volatile, when I'd expressed interest in investing some of my savings. Meanwhile, he'd been hiding digital assets all along. My thoughts raced to the legal implications. Taking his money could be construed as theft. But was it theft when he had systematically stolen my career, my privacy, my identity? When he had married me under completely fraudulent pretenses? When he had used my government position to illegally access confidential information? I wasn't a lawyer, but I understood justice. Every dollar in that safe represented compensation for damages already inflicted. Every diamond was restitution for future earnings he planned to strip from me. The crypto was payment for privacy violations that would have held up in any court. I removed exactly half the cash, $20,000. I took 3 of the 5 diamonds, leaving him the smallest 2. I photographed the notebook pages, then returned it to the safe. He'd know I had access to his crypto, but wouldn't know which wallets I might drain. The uncertainty would torture him more than the actual loss. Moving with deliberate calm, I packed a single carry-on bag with essentials. The designer clothes he'd insisted I wear stayed behind. I wanted nothing that represented his version of me. Instead, I took only what I'd brought into the marriage. My favorite jeans, worn sweaters, the comfortable shoes he'd hidden in the back of our closet. I dressed in layers, practical clothing for traveling unnoticed. The cash I distributed throughout my bag. The diamonds secured in a hidden pocket I'd sewn into my jacket months ago during a homemaking project Ethan had mockingly praised. Even then, some part of me must have been preparing for escape. Using the hotel's business center computer, avoiding the suite's laptop with its potential tracking software, I accessed the anonymous email account I'd created. I transferred the most damning evidence to a secure cloud storage, then scheduled delayed emails to be sent to specific recipients if I didn't cancel them within 72 hours. My insurance policy if Ethan came looking for me. One email would go to his investors, revealing how he'd used illegal surveillance to access government contract information. Another to the Department of Justice outlining potential federal crimes. A third to a journalist who specialized in corporate fraud. The nuclear options I hoped I wouldn't need to deploy. Next came the cryptocurrency transfers. Using the codes I'd memorized, I accessed his wallets, nearly $500,000 in digital assets, and transferred a portion to newly created accounts. Not everything, just enough to fund my disappearance and rebuilding. I wasn't interested in his money beyond what I needed to survive his inevitable retaliation. By 4:30 a.m., my practical preparations were complete. All that remained was the symbolic goodbye. I returned to our suite one last time. Ethan hadn't moved from the couch, dead to the world in alcoholic slumber. The man who'd seemed so powerful, so controlling, now resembled nothing more than an overgrown child. Mouth slack, limbs sprawled inelegantly, completely vulnerable. I could have hurt him. In his defenseless state, I could have enacted any number of physical revenges for the humiliation at the pool, for the months of psychological abuse, for the cold calculation of using me as a business acquisition. Instead, I chose something more devastating than physical pain. I chose to haunt him with the knowledge that I had seen through him completely. His half-empty bourbon glass sat on the coffee table. I slid my wedding ring, the 3-carat, ethically sourced diamond that had sealed our fraudulent contract, from my finger. For a moment, I held it between thumb and forefinger, this symbol of ownership rather than partnership. With deliberate care, I dropped it into the amber liquid. The heavy platinum band sank to the bottom with a soft clink, the diamond catching the dim light one last time before disappearing into the bourbon he loved more than anything except himself. Next to the glass, I placed a note, not the emotional outpouring he might expect, but something that would cut far deeper. You can't control what's already gone. 7 words to replace the wedding vows that had been nothing but empty performance. I stood over him one last moment, committing to memory this final image of Ethan Anderson. Unconscious, unaware, about to wake to the consequences of his actions for perhaps the first time in his privileged life. Tomorrow he would discover the missing diamonds, the depleted crypto, and the ring in bourbon. He would realize I knew everything, and wonder exactly what evidence I'd taken and who I might share it with. His perfect plan would crumble into paranoia. His investors would question his judgment. His family would distance themselves from potential scandal. His carefully constructed image would begin to crack. And I would be gone, not destroyed as he'd planned but transformed. Not erased but reborn. The night concierge barely glanced up as I crossed the lobby, just another guest making an early departure. The taxi I'd arranged waited at the service entrance, driver discreetly professional as I requested the train station 2 towns over. As we pulled away from the resort, I didn't look back at the mountain lodge with its pristine facade hiding ugly truths. Instead, I watched the road ahead, the darkness gradually yielding to the first hints of dawn. 3 weeks later, seated in a modest apartment in a city where nobody knew me, I received the news alert. Tech CEO Ethan Anderson steps down amid federal investigation into contract bidding irregularities. The accompanying photo showed him leaving his attorney's office, face haggard, the confident smirk replaced by grim resignation. I hadn't needed to send those insurance policy emails after all. Ethan's own partners had turned on him once they realized the extent of his recklessness. The investors who'd laughed as I dripped pool water onto marble floors were now scrambling to distance themselves from his imploding reputation. I sipped my coffee, not bourbon, and smiled at the small potted plant on my windowsill, the first decoration in my new life. I had taken back my name, Claire Adams, along with my independence. The modest settlement that eventually came from Ethan's lawyers in exchange for my silence about certain aspects of his business practices had been deposited into my new account. The diamonds remained hidden away, untouched. I didn't need his blood money to rebuild. They were simply insurance against the day he might think to look for me again. Some might call it revenge, this quiet justice I'd enacted. I called it restoration, of my dignity, my agency, my future. Sometimes freedom comes in dramatic escapes, in midnight revelations, in diamonds and crypto and wedding rings dropped in bourbon. Sometimes justice is best served cold, without fanfare, in the quiet aftermath of walking away. If this story of sweet revenge had you hooked, hit like and subscribe now. My favorite moment was when Claire dropped her wedding ring into the bourbon glass with that perfect note. You can't control what's already gone. Simple yet devastating. What was your favorite moment? Tell me in the comments section.